You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web, WMCLive.com, where you can also find links to all the podcasts of our previous shows. And you can tweet us at hashtag WMCLive or email me at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Today, we're going to look forward to the 50th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. March on Washington, which takes place in August. And we'll look backward at the march itself and at what's happened in between, all the way from electing our first black president to pronouncing George Zimmerman not guilty. And we'll try to figure out what it all means. Anti-racism strategist Rinku Sen is with us to help do that, as are two young women of color with their own questions, and their own answers, too. And Carol Jenkins adds her voice, which is not only that of a media veteran, but also of a feminist mother of a black son. Then I'll close us out before we go on a month's hiatus with some fighting words about the loss of great correspondent Helen Thomas. But first, yes, we need to go inside the headlines. And the headlines are still George Zimmerman and the not guilty verdict about the murder of Trayvon Martin. There is a superb piece by Salamisha Tillett, who is a young African-American writer. It's part of her series on the global epidemic of violence against women that's running in The Nation magazine. Salamisha Tillett, and you can Google her. This particular piece, everybody should read. I wish it were trumpeted on headlines across the country. In it, she points out that violence against girls and women is often an overlooked and unchecked indicator of future violence, which feminists have been saying for 40 years, but she's saying it again, and she's not being heard any more than, I guess, the rest of us have been. Two cases in point. In Zimmerman's case, these two pieces of character evidence never made it to the trial. First, a piece from the Miami Herald about witness number 9, Zimmerman's female cousin, who said that he molested her for 10 years when they were both children, beginning when she was just 6 years old. The second character witness, or anti-character witness, was a report filed in August 2005 when Zimmerman's former fiancée sought a restraining order against him because of domestic violence. And this latter accusation is particularly important because it provided the blueprint for his own claim of self-defense against Trayvon Martin. According to the Miami Herald, he was also involved in a domestic dispute with his ex-fiancée, Veronica Zauzo, a hair salon employee. And she claimed that he was trolling her neighborhood, sound familiar, to check on her. At her apartment, they spoke for a while, and then she asked him to leave, and he refused and demanded some photos and paperwork, and she refused, and a pushing match ensued, and her dog jumped up and bit him on the cheek. Zimmerman filed a petition the next day, painting her as the aggressor, sound familiar, wanting him to stay the night, he claimed. In her petition, she alleged that he had previously slapped her in the mouth. Anyway, it goes on, but the point is that his pattern for violence had already been established, trolling a neighborhood for his victim, pushing her when confronted, attacking her character, and then projecting and arguing that the other person was the aggressor when charges were filed against him. But while the Assistant State Attorney de la Ronda brought up both testimonies in a bond hearing in April 2012 about Zimmerman, they were not allowed to be presented as evidence during the trial. In contrast, however, the judge did rule that evidence of marijuana, just the tiniest trace that was found in Martin's system, that was admissible. Now, last week we talked about what a number of people now in the news are finally talking about, the case of Marissa Alexander, the African-American young mother who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for firing a warning shot into the ceiling in 2010 to scare off her abusive husband who was charging at her. He had been arrested 3 times for domestic violence. He had even pled guilty. But obviously there's a double standard for her invoking the Stand Your Ground law. As Salamisha Tillett says, one can't help but wonder if Zimmerman had been held accountable for the violence he had already inflicted on girls and women, that Trayvon Martin might be alive today. The knot of racism and sexism is so intertwined that it takes your breath away. And that women are the canaries in the mine, we've been saying and saying, except the difference is the miners pay attention to the canaries, they listen to them, they know their lives depend on them. In patriarchy, guys, not so much. So the next time you hear a story of violence of any sort against anybody, cherchez la femme, because probably it's there, almost always, in the history. And that's the headlines. Now, to our first guest. Rinku Sen is an Indian-American author and activist. She's the president and executive director of the Applied Research Center, a public policy institute focused on race, and she's the publisher of the magazine Color Lines. A women's studies major in college, she's written 2 books and numerous articles. She's a strategist in the battle against racism, sexism, and other such public ills, and she is an all-round healthy influence on society. Rinku Sen. Rinku, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Let's start first on the fact that it's coming up the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and some days it feels like we're back where we started with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act and the verdict in Florida, and other days it feels like there's going to be a new civil rights movement. What are you feeling?
Well, I definitely think there's going to be a new civil rights, and I tend to think of it as a new racial justice movement, a modern one that can meet the needs of American society as it exists today in the 21st century, with a lot of different kinds of people living in the racial hierarchy, and a movement that can actually deal with the way that racism works and plays itself out today, which is different from what people expect from the past. So generally Americans think of racism as always being intentional and overt and individual, but in fact, as we have been able to see through the horrors of the George Zimmerman trial and the Trayvon Martin murder case, much of how racism works is unconsciously, that we walk around with these stereotypes and we make judgments, particularly about black guilt, and we're totally unaware that we are doing it. So that plays out individually, as it did in the tragic conflict between Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, but it also plays out institutionally, as it did throughout the trial, where really all of the professionals involved in the Zimmerman trial agreed and acted as though racism was not at all a factor in that trial.
I know. It was amazing, absolutely amazing to watch. It just
So the new racial justice movement and all of the activities around the 50th anniversary of the march really need to focus at least partly on helping Americans address and grapple with the notion that racism is still alive and well, but it's not, it doesn't come in the form of an older white Southern man using the N-word while he tries to keep black kids out of white schools. Right. It takes many different forms, but still deadly forms.
It's once I heard on television a Ku Klux Klan member saying, "I'm no racist." You know, I mean, the cognitive dissonance is staggering.
Some of it actually is cognitive, that we're largely unaware of what our brains are doing. Mostly we're unconscious and we're not thinking about things. And I think, also it is a reaction, the right-wing framing of racism as always being overt and intentional is in fact a clever strategy for undermining all of our civil rights laws. And those laws were in fact shaped to deal with they were shaped with a very narrow definition of racism in mind, precisely so that our institutions would not have to deal with all of the depth of that problem.
Right. And also, as long as you posit it as an aberration, something weird that some individual does, you manage to avoid looking at the fact that it's systemic.
It protects a lot of white privilege in many different settings.
Well, so the new social justice movement, racial social justice movement, will look very different and say some more good things about it.
Well, I think you'll see also people connecting different kinds of constituencies and issues a lot more than we would have seen it 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think in the activities this year, you'll see a lot of feminists and racial justice folks and immigration rights people and economic justice activists trying to bring their issues together and bring their constituencies together, and not treating all of those systems as though they operate in exactly the same way, but recognizing that they're all of those different kinds of activists are dealing with attacks on their communities and efforts to control their communities. And that we can, in fact, work together to support each other's individual fights and to elevate American consciousness.
And I know there's women in every one of those groups, and women are the glue of communities. Women are the visionaries. Women are the last consulted and the first to suffer, the canaries in the mine. And so I hope that there will be a look for women's leadership in such coalitions, because
that leadership is really, really critical, because one of the things that makes women such good strategists in these problems is that they get to experience the problem at every level. So they can understand exactly how it plays out in the home, in the hospital, in the school, in the neighborhood, and they also have a really clear understanding from their roles as lawmakers and public administrators and teachers of what the larger societal trends are. And so, cutting women out of the strategizing on these issues, which unfortunately is still something that I see happen a lot, is an enormous mistake for our movements.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what's happening in Florida, Rinku, because I know that there's organizing going on there in terms of the foul stand your ground law, but it's unfortunately not only in Florida. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are many states in which stand your ground laws exist, and what's happening in Florida is that the Dream Defenders, which is a multiracial group of people, in large part that grew out of the immigrant rights movement, and particularly the movement of undocumented young people, they have been taking over their state house and urging their legislators to undo these laws. So the Dream Defenders are pushing hard for criminal justice reform in Florida, both of this kind, but also of the kinds that really criminalize immigrants.
Wonderful. I love their name, too. It's the Dream Defenders is a great name. It's a cross between visionary and comic strip hero. It can't be beat. It's just terrific.
Yes.
We've only got a couple minutes left, but take those minutes and talk about immigration, and particularly the way that it impacts on women, because that gets so overlooked. And to me, that's the heart of the matter, because families are split up. Because, when this country and the press think of the immigrant, usually it's a man. And I wish we could exchange or expand that image, that optic.
Yeah, it's really important. about 2 years ago now, we broke a story about how immigrant parents who are deported end up losing their kids permanently and legally, so that the kids either spend their lives in foster care or are made eligible for adoption. That's really an extreme example of how our policies criminalizing immigrants, including immigrant women, immigrant children, actually ends up abducting the children of particularly low-income immigrants with limited English. And that's a result that as Americans we can't stand for that. That is being done in our name, in the fury, the rush to deport as many undocumented immigrants as the Obama administration can possibly get its hands on. And so that is, women bear the brunt of that burden, and we have seen some positive results. For example, after that report we did in the Senate version of the Comprehensive Immigrant Rights Bill, there is actually a provision that would enable deported parents to come back, because of course we don't know how many thousands of children were separated from parents legally in that way over the many years that deportation has been going on. So if we raise these issues and really put them in front of the American public, we are in fact making some progress among legislators, but we can't let up. We have to keep that pressure on, certainly through the period until some kind of reform is passed, but then after, as we're looking to implement that reform.
Thank you so much, Rinku, for all that you do, and also for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live. I wish we had more time, but you come back. You promise?
I absolutely do. Thank you so much, Robin, for the chance to talk to your listeners today.
We have to take a break here. This, of course, is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. When we return, we're going to eavesdrop on two young women who count themselves as activists and have a strong sense of who they are and what they want to do to change the world. We'll be right back. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. Made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists, Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest-hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back, with our ears pressed against the door, or rather against the radio or the earbud, to listen in on the next conversation. We hear a lot lately about how young women are not interested in feminism, which is a total myth, and all you need to do is to Google combinations of young and feminisms or go to feminism.com to be absolutely overwhelmed at the activism. We're also told, another lie, that feminism is mostly a white women's movement. This has never been true, and is true less now than ever before, since more African-American women, for example, identify with the word feminist in this country than do European-American women. How's that? Well, here are two young women of color in a conversation that's going to give you hope for and confidence in the future. So, I'm here with these two terrific young women, Sayda Zelaya, who works at the Women's Media Center, and Keneisha Deas, who is interning with the Women's Media Center. And each of you tell our listeners a little something about yourselves. Sayda, you start.
Sure. Well, I'm the executive assistant to the president, Julie Burton, at Women's Media Center. A little bit about myself. I was born in Honduras. I moved here when I was 6. And I went to school in Pennsylvania, moved to D.C., and hoping to go and be in law school within the next year to come.
Cool. Okay. And Keneisha, you take it away.
Yes, I am currently interning with Miss Crystal Chancellor here at Women's Media Center. I am currently a student at Howard University. This is my senior year, and I am majoring in broadcast journalism. And in the future, I do plan to become a reporter and later on a video journalist.
Oh, you the two of you don't know how I'm sitting here with a big grin on my face. You're giving me joy about the future. You really are. Okay, so dare I ask your ages, Sayda?
I am 24.
And Keneisha?
I am 3 days shy away from my 22nd birthday.
I am 112 by now.
I don't believe it.
Well, some days it feels that way. So it's really important to hear from you what you think about the fact that it's now coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Martin Luther King March, otherwise known as the Great March on Washington, on the 28th of August. What have you heard about the march? What do you know of it? What do you think of it? Do you feel you wish you'd been at it? Do you feel that it won ground? Have we slipped back? What do you think and feel about that as young women who didn't experience it? You can go in any order you like.
Oh, okay. I'll start. Well, the march was basically organized by a group of civil activists, labor and religious organizations who were focused on jobs and freedom of equality. And the importance of that march is crucial to the fabric of the United States because it paved the way for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So in terms of history and where we are, I mean, it's one of the most important events to have happened. Mm-hmm. But when you really dive more into the details of, who was in charge and the idea of equality, that's when it gets a little shaky.
What do you mean? Do you mean to you? That's when it feels a little shaky?
It feels a little shaky to me because at a glance when you're learning about it in school, you think this is such a great moment in history. Martin Luther King gave this great I Have a Dream speech that everyone listens to and that everyone copies whenever, there's like a movement. Everyone is touched by it. And I mean, it's a great speech, too, but when you really think about the idea of equality, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me because most of the speakers at this march were only by men. Uh-huh. And there really weren't any women present, and it's kind of a shame considering that women were just as much of an influential role as men were in the civil rights movement.
Yeah. And what about you, Keneisha?
Right. Sayda, she definitely has a good point there. And to me personally, I think that the civil rights movement was a catalyst of change. And I think it was a springboard for a lot of what we see today. And we'll just go dive in with the Trayvon Martin case and the verdict afterwards. I think everyone's approach to the verdict was basically civil disobedience. The protests weren't unruly. I think we've come a long way, and there's definitely challenges because I feel as if, in a way, we've kind of gone back quite a few years. Yes, been advanced in the community, in the minority community, but in a way it just seems the same, and there has to be some change in laws. And that also includes the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, which we just lost, which the court struck down. Or
right.
they didn't strike it down, but they gutted it. They took the heart right out of it.
Right. They omitted the Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, and the fifth section depends on the fourth, so it's almost like the fifth section is not even necessary.
That's right.
So, it's. I definitely feel, though, that as far as civil rights in modern day, it is coming back. It's definitely a resurgence.
Well, that's encouraging.
And I think the reason why it continues to resurface is that here you had this great movement that was, strategically planned and very well organized, But I think it's kind of like that effect when, it's like, oh, okay, well, we reached some level of success. Now we're kind of comfortable. We have some sort of freedom, like, we go to co-ed schools. We don't really have to think about race. And in our society, we either don't want to think about it or don't want to talk about it because it's so taboo. But when you look at the case of Trayvon Martin or the Voting Rights Act, these things tend to resurface, and we don't necessarily... Not that we don't care about it or that we're not working hard for it, but I just think that we're at a level of comfortability, and if it's not personally affecting us, then we're not going to do too much about it, but I think that that's where it kind of gets shaky.
Right.
We always need to be on top of these things to make sure that issues like this don't happen and that we, hold our government accountable for these types of acts.
Right.
I'll add, too, that I do feel as well as it was, actually more so today, I feel like there's a solidarity of everyone coming together and really fighting for the cause, once again going back to the verdict of after the trial of George Zimmerman. Some people, they'll even admit that they don't know what it's like to feel that way because, let's just say it, they're not in the black male shoes or the black woman's shoes, so they can't really understand what the experience is like. But they do know that it's a violation of civil rights, it's a violation of human rights, and it's morally wrong.
And nobody is ever in anybody else's shoes. When that becomes an excuse not to act, then it's pretty stinky.
Right.
Exactly.
I want to ask you about the future and going forward, but I want to remember to put in one thing, which I've mentioned off air. For younger listeners who might not know about the history of women in the civil rights struggle, there is an amazing book. There are many, but this is particularly, I think, the best. It's written by Barbara Smith, who founded Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, and she's an old friend, and she's been a guest on this show. And it's about the whole civil rights movement, but largely about the role of black women in it, which, of course, got, guess what, ignored. And it's called, the longest title is All of the Women Were White, All the Blacks Were Men, But Some of Us Were Brave. And it gets shortened to simply the phrase, but some of us were brave. And it is a brilliant and remarkable book. And the other one thing I was thinking when you were talking is that, of course, what made the march really dangerous, the Martin Luther King March, was, and what the papers of the time were deploring in some editorials, was that he took the struggle out of the box of being solely on race and racism, and he extended it to include economics. And he was making alliances with labor and with poor people, and with, the Poor People's March came at a certain point too. And that was considered really dangerous. How dare he? Because this country has a remarkable capacity to co-opt exactly what you were saying about making people think, well, that's over and won now. Aren't you happy? Sit down and, shut up.
Right.
So that brings me to ask, what do each of you feel are real priorities in the next, say 5 years or so? Or if you want to, you can make it bigger and for your whole lives in terms of political change in this country. One of you is going to be a lawyer. One of you is going to be a broadcaster. These are two really important skills that can be used for all sorts of good things. So if you had a magic wand today, what would you want to happen politically? Well, in the broad sense. It doesn't have to be electoral, but I mean in the broad sense.
Well, I would say more so with employment and how actually the unemployment rate for African Americans is larger than the national average.
Right.
If I could magically change anything, it would definitely be that. It's just a part of course, that idea that in the African American community it's impoverished, and because of that, it's the lack of jobs that we receive. And so, honestly, 5 years from now, I would think that would be top priority, employment.
Okay. And what about you, Sayda?
I come from a kind of like a background of field organizing, so I think the number one priority for myself and what I think would improve our society more, it would be to educate the masses and effectively, and not just educating. I'm not saying like teach somebody their ABCs. I mean, that's important, but more so making people aware and educating them in a way where they can understand, the government and how it works, to be more politically inclined.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when a citizen is informed and kind of, thinking in terms of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in which a society is more functional and is at its best when they are more politically inclined, and not just saying like you pick whether you want to be a Democrat or Republican.
Right.
I'm talking about challenging your government and not in a coercive way either. Unless it had to be to that extreme. But I'm more so saying pay attention, see what's going on. If even within your community, do something about it and learn about the process. And I guess that would be the best way to go about it, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of fixing that needs in this country, but that would probably be my number one priority.
Education, so that people become more engaged.
Yeah, absolutely, especially within the lower and the middle classes.
Yeah. What do each of you think about President Obama? I'm curious because, as you know, in some quarters, just like some people say, well, feminism is dead. It's all been won, when in fact I must have been in the shower, I always say, and missed it. Because, nobody's getting raped anymore. Women get equal pay. Nobody's getting battered. Oh, piece of cake. They say the same thing about racism. Oh, of course it has to be post-racism because we have a black president. And then we lose the Voting Rights Act, and we have the Zimmerman verdict. So I know what I feel about it, but I want to hear what you feel about President Obama and how that gets used, and also the job that you think he's doing.
Well, I'll say that he has in a sense made his mark, particularly with education.
Mm-hmm.
I know my first year in college, I used the Pell Grant to support my education. That was one of the ways in which my education was financed.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really pulled some strings with education. Still working on healthcare. I mean, I think that's a forever struggle.
Yeah.
But I think he just needs more time. A lot of people tend to blame him for the state of the economy not moving upward, but it's been damaged for about 8 years prior to him. And to clean that up in 4 years is impossible. I mean, we can even go back to FDR.
Mm-hmm. It
took about 9 years, I think including during his term, to get the economy rolling again.
That's right, and he had 3 terms.
Right, after the economic crash.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it takes time. I'm not saying in any way that our president is perfect. I don't think any president prior to was perfect. But I would say so far that he's making great strides for this country.
What about you, Sayda?
I don't know. I feel a little. My relationship and how I feel about Barack Obama is a shaky one, and I will admit that when he first won the presidency, I was very happy. It was great to see a man of color be the president of the United States. And I, was one of those, girls that were like, oh, my God, Barack Obama. But as time went on, that slowly started to change. And, you're not always going to like the president that, is going to hold that office. But I do think that Barack Obama is doing his best in order to improve the state of our economy. But in terms of foreign policy, I would have to probably just completely disconnect myself from that. And I don't necessarily agree with his policies, internationally wise. And I think, it comes from a lack of experience, for one. And two, it's also a game of politics and, public interest. So that's how I feel. feel about Barack
Wow.
Obama.
Well, we've got to start winding up anyway. I have to say, the world will be in very good hands. I mean, I realize that there's a self-selection process going on in the young women who come to the Women's Media Center to begin with, but so you're already certified crazy and ready to change the world and ready to work until your bones drop and ready to go for years without having the time to wash your hair or go to the bathroom. So I realize all of that, but still, it's absolutely wonderful to hear your voices and the complexity of your concerns and the just fait accompli given of your commitment. So you make me very grateful and pleased and proud, and I hope you have a great time, both of you, at the Washington office of the Women's Media Center, and I thank you for being at the Women's Media Center and today at Women's Media Center Live. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. This week's Surrealism Corner is record in brevity. 2 words. Anthony Weiner. Now, for those of you who have been on Mars, Anthony Weiner is back again with a new revelation that he continued his online sexting escapades, in fact, escalated them, and photographs after he resigned from Congress and during the time he was in therapy and ostensibly working things through in his marriage. It just is breathtaking. This is one sick puppy, and even the sexism aside, I do not want such a sick puppy with an addictive compulsion to be the mayor of my city. I don't think it's coincidental, however, that that compulsion took its form in terms of sexism. Anthony Weiner. That's it for surrealism, but wow, I'm telling you, that's a lot of surrealism in those 2 words. And it's time to pause again briefly. This is still Robin Morgan on Still Women's Media Center Live. When we come back, we'll hear from a totally sane, highly intelligent woman who tells the story of when she lost her mind with fear the night she didn't know what had happened to her young son, who was in mortal danger just for being black.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Our last guest today is a familiar, mellifluous voice to regular Women's Media Center Live listeners. An Emmy Award winner, she was one of the first women and first persons of color ever to anchor the evening news on NBC TV. She's run her own TV production company, she's written articles and a book, and she served as the founding president of the Women's Media Center. Carol Jenkins. Oh, dear Carol, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Robin. Happy to be here.
Well, let's talk about Florida, and not just Florida, but what Florida exposed in terms of the racism still carving itself into the heart of America. Last week on this program, I referred to a conversation I'd had years ago with a good friend who was a feminist mother of a son like me, and that I'd said at one point in the conversation, you know, I wonder how he'll be when he grows up. And you said, except I didn't identify it as you, and now I can, I wonder how my son will be if he grows up. And that's a very real difference. Talk about being the mother of a young black male human being in this country.
Well, you know, when we talked about that and you reminded me of that conversation, I also remembered the night that I lost my mind over my black son not coming home. I think that is what every mother of a black son, no matter what her color, if a boy black, Latino, there are fears that just reside within your body. And it doesn't matter how old they are, because they can be 10 and you'd be worried, and they can be 30 and you'll still be worried.
Yeah.
And one night, Mike, who did grow up to be a man, thank you, with feminist values and all, except, it was 2:00 in the morning and I hadn't heard from him. I couldn't reach him on his phone. And I absolutely lost my mind. I raced out of my apartment, went down to the corner of the street so that I could be sure to see him as he was coming out. I don't know what flipped that switch, but that fear that resides in the chest of mothers like me just bubbled to the surface that one night. And I called my daughter, and she said, Mother, you're overreacting. Go home. He'll be home soon. He's probably out having a good time. And I just stood there like stone until I finally saw him ambling, towards home, and really annoyed to see his crazed mother standing on the corner at that time of night. But, so that it's the kind of thing that you stoke down. You try not to be worried, but you can't really help it. So I know women who've lost their sons on the streets of many, many cities across this country, to either thugs or to drugs or to the police. And while we don't have stand your ground here, the thing that concerns me in New York City is the stop and frisk. Because I've had this conversation with Mike. Now, Mike, the police may stop you, and he says, well, why? And I said, well, because you're brown, you're black, know. And he says, what the hell? And I have not been able to break his pride and his confidence sufficiently to be sure that he would act meekly enough so that he wouldn't get in trouble or shot. Who knows? But so it's the problem of the black man of having to figure out how to be in the world. We know with Trayvon Martin, we walking too fast, too slowly. Do you have a swagger or not? What kind of clothes can you wear? And that they all may be after you, the bad guys and the good guys. So I think we still have a serious problem here. And I was so moved by the President of the United States by speaking personally about what it's like. I think that's the best thing that he could have done at that moment.
Oh, yeah.
To talk about how he had heard the doors of the cars clicking, shut, locking. He had seen people, women hold on to their purses and shy away from him. It's, as he says, we are not in a post-racial society. America is still in the grips of raciality, and black boys and black men are what I call them the lost boys of our country. We've lost so many generations of them, and they've gone missing without a murmur of the general population. And so I think it's time for us to focus on that now.
Yeah, it's the heart just cracks when you think of all the mothers worried about all their kids, all those boys. I mean, and literally, it's a constant, it's a chronic terror. It's a form of terrorism, really. When you were talking about that, I flashed on a strange analogy with the rape victim. It's a blame the victim thing. I mean, so whatever she's wearing, it was her fault. It is a projection of the perpetrator onto the victim, that it's really the victim's fault. You're making me do this.
It's almost as if Trayvon Martin wearing a hoodie deserved to die.
That's right. That verdict and the recent eviscerating of the Voter Rights Act, which we've talked about a lot on this program recently, have me alternating between psychotic despair and depression, and real hope, because we've also been talking to a lot of young activists who seem hell-bent for election that they are creating a new civil rights movement, a new racial justice movement, that they're not going to put up with this anymore, that it takes different forms now and it will take different strategies to address it. For those of us who were around, as many of them weren't, 50 years ago when the March on Washington took place, it's both hopeful and it's the best of times and the worst of times, it seems to me. How does it feel to you?
Well, I think that everything that we say about it is mitigated by the fact that within those 50 years we've been able to elect enthusiastically and with a wide swath of the population a black president.
Right.
So that everything has to fall into that context, because while most blacks did vote for him, also, millions of whites did. So here was a confidence in a black man to run this country. So I think with that, now we've got a Supreme Court that has really, I think, especially in the face of all of the voting problems that have taken place in our recent elections. It would be one thing if there had not been these lengthy, lines and people being turned away.
Yeah.
And, all kinds of stipulations being imposed for the first time on mostly
flat-out voter suppression.
Exactly. So that is extraordinary that we have a Supreme Court that has deflected from this effort. So that means that Congress has to, and people have to take up the slack in that. And I do think that there is something to this idea that all of these negative things happening will stir people up, and young people particularly.
I think it has a radicalizing effect, and bad as that may be, it is at least better than people running around and saying, well, we have a black president, so that means there's no more racism in this country, which, my walls show the claw marks from where I have climbed them.
I'm rereading James Baldwin this summer, and I just reread his Native Son, and I would suggest that anybody trying to measure the progress should read what he wrote about his life in the 40s and 50s and 60s as a black man, and what is taking place in this country today with black boys, because he is so articulate. It's just extraordinary. And for me, he articulates that rage that builds up in a human being when you are being excluded and discriminated against.
Yes.
For just being who you are. It's extraordinary. And the march, which was orchestrated by a brilliant man by the name of Bayard Rustin.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Who, back in the 1940s with A. Philip Randolph, had threatened a march on Washington and utilized that whole plan for 1963. But Bayard Rustin was asked to be quiet, to step aside, because he was a gay man.
That's right.
And they didn't want to, sully somehow the effort of the civil rights movement with this issue of a gay man, brilliant gay man, being a part of this.
Yeah.
So for me, this march 50 years later is really for Bayard Rustin. I feel that what the progress that we've made in equality and marriage and what will happen, is really truly a result of his hard work and his lack of recognition.
Oh, I'm so moved that you're saying this, Carol, because he was a hero of mine from the very beginning. That's a lovely way to celebrate the march in his memory. As always with you, I wish there were more time, but I'm so grateful that you came and told your own story of going crazy and shared your wisdom. And were with us on Women's Media Center Live, which is one of your homes, too. Grandma. Yes. Grandma of new twins, too.
I know. Now I have another boy to worry about. I have grandsons. So,
okay.
There you are.
Well,
Keep going.
Well, we'll have to make a climate where we won't have to worry about him so much. That's what we need to do.
Great. Well, I can count on you to do that, Robin. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
And we have to take another quick break here on Women's Media Center Live. As usual, I'm still Robin Morgan, and I will be right back with some fighting words.
Want to stay informed when there are changes to Social Security? Subscribe to receive automatic email updates on popular Social Security web pages with the click of a button. Just visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. More than 1 million people already receive updates to the pages they're most interested in. You can too. Look for the red envelope followed by a link that says Get Email Updates. To learn more, visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. Social Security delivers.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Fighting Words this week is a tribute in memory of Helen Thomas, who is dead at 92, and who could do more with a question than most people in the world can do with answers. She has been a world-class reporter for 70 years, much of that time in the White House. And better than anything that I can say is a tribute to her written by Barbara Lubin, a peace, justice, and disability rights activist and a founder of MECA, M-E-C-A, which stands for Middle East Children's Alliance. You can go to their website, MECA.org, and find the actual eulogy or tribute. It's quite wonderful, but I want to share with you some sections of it. She points out that news articles and obituaries are now obligatorily mentioning her forced retirement over political remarks about Palestine and Israel, Helen's, that is. She says that now that she's died, it's become politically correct to re-embrace her because now Helen is safe. She won't be asking the uncomfortable questions anymore, questions that made lying politicians squirm as they stared dumbfounded back at her, always shocked at freedom of the press in action and at a woman who simply did not know her place. It's true that Helen Thomas did more to challenge the Iraq War, for example, from the back row of the White House press corps, as Lubin points out. That's where she was relegated, by the way, for 3 years after criticizing George Bush in 2003. She did more to challenge that war than any embedded journalist did on the front lines. She stood for a journalistic integrity that was not welcome in the White House or in the corporate media congressional complex. Lubin notes that at the beginning of her career, Helen was fired for going on strike with her colleagues at the Washington Daily News. She then faced decades of abuse because she was openly opinionated, because she wouldn't back down, and, of course, because she was a woman. And this got compounded in later years. Lubin notes that it was shocking to see how George Bush and, yes, Barack Obama addressed her. Ageism in presidential clothing, she writes, as if Helen was a child to be tolerated but dismissed and chuckled at. The forced retirement was because she was accused of being anti-Zionist by Ari Fleischer and Lanny Davis and folks who felt that she had no right to ask questions about the nature of the U.S. alliance with Israel and why everybody averted their eyes at the unspoken of nuclear arsenal that everybody knew Israel had. For this, she was forced, basically, into retirement. Lubin, in one of her trips for Middle East Children's Alliance, met with journalists, and she tells a touching story at the end of this tribute about meeting with a very young Palestinian journalist who had recently completed her studies in London and returned to Gaza, and stated to us, she writes Lubin, that she wanted to be the next Helen Thomas. And another journalist said, "Oh, you mean because of Thomas's comments on Palestine?" "No, that's not why," the young woman answered. "There are two things that will change the world," she said, "media and women, and I am both." This, Lubin points out, is Helen Thomas's legacy. I urge you to look at the piece itself at meca.org. This is also the legacy of this program and of the Women's Media Center, which is both media and women. It's hard to believe that today was our 49th show. On August 26th, we'll have been on the air and on the web for a year. We'll be celebrating that anniversary and the day it falls on. Yes, we launched on Women's Equality Day, the birthday of women's suffrage. off air we'll celebrate, because we're going to take a hiatus for the month of August. I want to express gratitude to the staff of this program and of the entire Women's Media Center, since other departments contribute ideas, criticism, and energy, and to the remarkable guests who have graced our show. We have hosted congresswomen and Nobel Prize nominees, movie stars, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnists, and best-selling authors. But as, or more importantly, we've brought you the voices of the first feminist group in Kurdistan, and of a defiant young Lakota woman on the reservation, of Palestinian and Israeli women starting a brand new peace movement by dieting together, of the woman daring to reopen the abortion clinic of the murdered Dr. Tiller, and of a college Republican who stands for marriage equality. High school women and octogenarians, scientists and observant women of faith, and atheists and Wiccans. We've tried to connect the dots between racism and sexism and homophobia, between ageism and disability rights, and the planet's rights. And I've had the chance to speak personally about a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, because the personal is political. We've broken news stories on this program, and we've laughed rather raucously, and we've played jazz and 9th century cloister music by women, and read poetry, told stories, mourned, wept, and raged at willful stupidities. You can hear 5 reruns of some of your and our favorite shows while we're hiatusing. When we started, I promised you entry into what I call a different reality, one that the majority of humanity, female people, inhabit all the time, and which rarely makes news. Making that reality visible is one of the missions of the Women's Media Center. And aiming to maintain a consistent level of quality, audacious, provocative, informative, and, oh yes, fun radio is both exciting and challenging. I assume our listeners' intelligence and curiosity, and I never underestimate it. Thank you for that. What we've done so far, though, is nothing compared to our plans for the fall. Watch for the announcements beginning in late August on Facebook, Twitter, and in the press, because in September, I'm going to return with Women's Media Center Live with some wickedly good surprises, and with guests and controversy and commentaries that I think will make a fair amount of people say, as a matter of course, "Did you hear the latest WMC Live on ... fill in the blank." I can hardly wait. And in the meantime, though, I intend to finish the new book of poems, tend to my neglected garden, read, listen to music, see a movie or two, cook for friends, catch up on sleep and on exercise, and enjoy life. Yes, even in a patriarchy. So that's it for this week and for our first season. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMCLive.com, where you can find podcasts of all our previous shows. You can tweet us at hashtag WMCLive or email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for WMC Live. President of the Women's Media Center, and for this program, executive producer Julie Burton. Senior producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor. Technical director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns. Beneficent editorial spirit Mary Tom. And our founding sponsor Regina Kulik-Scully. The theme music and the music for our breaks is variously by singer-songwriters Blake Morgan, Yanita, Melissa Geigas, and David Cloyd, all of them recording artists with ECR Music Group. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. Have an august August, and be sure to rejoin us in September for politics and laughter and poetry and rage and science and wonder. Join us together with the smart men who want their full humanity and want to be on the winning side, and especially with the women who are daring to save ourselves, each other, and the world. We are everywhere, but you can hear us for sure here on the talk show with a brain, Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.